If you were lucky enough to have been born in the 90s or early 2000s, you would have experienced the peak of one of Disney's most successful lines, the Disney princesses. Whether you're a die-hard fan of the royal princesses or you're just aware of their existence, the game that they feature in that we are going to be looking into today will shock you with the amount of quality gameplay, visual charm, and ton of nostalgia. So I invite you to reminisce with me and take a look into the underrated gem that is THQ's and Disney's Disney Princesses for Game Boy Advance, and see why this might be one of the best girl games we are yet to cover on this channel. Hi, welcome to today's video. I am Otter. If you have been to my channel before, hello, hi, welcome. It's lovely to see you again. And if you haven't been to my channel before, hello, hi, welcome. It's really lovely to meet you. Since I started making videos about girly gaming from the 2000s, this game has always popped up in my head, and it is the 2003 Game Boy Advance game, Disney Princesses. Now, it's so interesting because this title feels like such a throwaway and feels like it should be shovelware, but the game means so much to me and so many other girly gamers of the 2000s who experienced this, so I just had to give it its own video. But as usual, before we jump in, if you do find yourself enjoying this video at any point, please consider giving it a like and subscribing to become an Otter and join the Otter Den. I am on a mission to hit 2,000 subscribers by the end of 2024, and I would really appreciate your support in helping me get there. And you'll never miss out on a nostalgic girly video from me, so it's a win-win. A win for you and a win for me. But without further ado, let's jump straight on into THQ's and Disney's Disney Princesses for Game Boy Advanced. Now, as I mentioned, this game is literally just titled Disney Princesses. There is no further context, no fluff, no anything else. It's literally just a game about Disney princesses. And it's not wrong, but it's also so much more than that. This game had a literal chokehold on me when I was younger. It was licensed by THQ, published by Disney Interactive Studios, and developed by Art Co Limited. It was released in April of 2003, according to Amy Chan, to celebrate the 80 years of Walt Disney Company, but I couldn't find any concrete evidence to back this up. The platformer title featured 6 of Disney's most iconic Disney princesses at the time: Snow White, Belle, Cinderella, Aurora, Ariel, and Jasmine. They each starred in their own storylines, which in some cases were quite similar to their original movies, but in a lot of them, they just came up with their own thing and they rocked it. They had elements that were the same, but there was also things that were added or removed or altered to create a more seamless, gameplay-friendly storyline. The game is split into each of the 6 princesses' storyline, each having 2 to 3 chapters, with the last chapter always being a boss battle. And honestly, these girls are so iconic in this title. It blew me away when I went back to it as an adult and was researching it, and especially for a game that did come out in 2003 when the girly gaming genre was still very much in its roots and girls in the gaming industry were not being represented very much at all. There were some things, I'm not saying there was nothing, but in terms of good quality, decent, worth playing titles that were actually enjoyable and had value, it was so rare for a title like this to also not only have value and quality, but to also have 6, not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4, not 5, but 6 iconic and inspiring female role models. And not only this, but the gameplay and aesthetics of the title really complement this so perfectly, and it makes a surprisingly high quality and worthwhile girly game. Now let's jump into the actual content of the game. If you did play this game as a child, you may remember that it's set in a book format, essentially. The book then opens and you see a list of the princesses, you have the options, there's a couple of other things listed on there, and a bunch of question marks, and we'll find out what that is at the end of the video, so stick around for that. And I don't know about you guys, but one of my favorite parts of this game is the music. Like literally, if you close your eyes and just listen to the music in this game, it's an experience in itself. Now the main objective of the game, which I didn't realize when I was playing this as a kid, but you're meant to complete all the levels and find the Tiara of Friendship or something. THQ mentioned it on their website, which is now actually not available, but I found it in a guide that this is like the main part of the game, but they never actually mention it until right at the end when it gives you it as a reward for like completing the game, but I had no clue this was a thing. Also, in order to 100% the game, you have to not only complete all the levels, but also collect all the treasures and collect 100 coins. But we are getting way ahead of ourselves by talking about the end of the game, so let's jump into the beginning and talk about Snow White. Now, Snow White is both Disney's first princess and the first princess's story that we experience in this title. The 7 dwarfs have all been turned to stone by the evil queen, and Snow White is tasked with finding 3 differently shaped magical gems to turn them back, and you use her singing voice as her main weapon and way to manipulate the space around her. I know it might not sound very inspiring that you're using her voice, but I actually do like that they've stuck true to the film, and I like that they sort of kept this element of her, but also found a way for her to use it to her advantage to defeat enemies. So her first chapter, we are in the forest finding gems. We battle spiders and evil trees, similar to what we see in the film. Obviously, this level is going to be incredibly easy because it is the first chapter that we do in the game. Once you find the 3 gems and you've saved the first 3 dwarfs, you move on to the mines, where there are more spiders, but also bats this time instead of trees. With the help of the dwarfs you just rescued, they help you break down rocks for you to access new areas in the map. You are also finding 3 different shaped gems again to save the dwarfs who are hidden throughout the mine. After finding these gems and saving the dwarfs, you move on to the boss battle. And just for context, every boss battle features the main villain of that princess's film, just to keep that in mind going forward. Now, you might be thinking as well, we saved 3 dwarfs in the Forbidden Forest level, we saved 3 dwarfs in chapter 2. What about the 7th? Where is Dopey? Well, he is actually being held captive, I guess, his statue is, by the evil queen. So our boss battle is to defeat her and then also save Dopey, who is the last dwarf. This is very, very easy, the boss battle. You essentially dodge, I'm not sure if they're meant to be poisoned apples or just regular apples that she's throwing at you. I'm going to go with poisoned apples because obviously that's a big part of the Snow White plot. The dwarves run in, I think it's just Grumpy, it might be multiple ones, but from what I saw, Grumpy runs in, throws a diamond at her face, and I think you have to do it 3 times, maybe 4, and then you defeat her. So it's very, very simple. You just got to make sure that you're dodging the apples. Overall, I do feel like Snow White's story is one of the weaker of the 6. It's not the weakest, but it's definitely one of the weaker ones. I do feel like it is at a disadvantage as it is the first gameplay that you have. So we are right at the bottom of the learning curve here, and it's gonna feel very, very simple. I do feel like Snow White's story as a whole is quite basic and not as well developed as some of the later princesses. But despite this, I love, love, love the environments and the vibes that they give. They really, really echo the movie of Snow White, which is something that this game does incredibly well with all the princesses. Up next is Belle from Beauty and the Beast, and her section, specifically chapter 2, absolutely terrified me as a kid. The premise of her plot is that Gaston, I believe, has stolen the magic rose and hidden it in the woods. He has also hidden a load of your friends in order to out the dark magic of the castle so that you can marry him, I guess. Her storyline is kind of random and doesn't make any sense really. It did kind of confuse me. Her first chapter takes place in the woods outside the castle, which you will remember from the film. You need to find the magic rose to access the castle, and you fight LeFou and werewolves with literal snowballs, which I don't know how hard she's throwing these or whether she put rocks in them, but I don't feel like that's your strongest choice of weapon, Belle. And I do like with the snowballs that you have to keep them stocked up, so you can hold 5 at a time, which is indicated by the snowflakes at the bottom of the screen, and you have to make sure that you have enough to defeat the enemies that are upcoming. So it adds another gameplay element in that you have to strategically think about how many snowballs you're using and where you're using them, as to whether you will be able to stock them up in a snow pile or not to defeat villains coming up. Once you make it through the end of the platformer, you obviously find the rose and then enter chapter 2, which, oh my god, watching this back, I literally shivered and I felt true fear. I think it's a combination of the music, which is really creepy and ominous, the darkness of the doorways, which, I don't know, I've always had a thing with dark spaces and not knowing what's in them. That has always creeped me out. But then also just the fact that this level is timed and feels really pressured. I think it just tipped me over the edge in my little 6-year-old sensitive brain, and even now it puts me on edge and makes me nervous. So you go through the castle solving puzzles and manipulating the environment to find 9 characters, which is a lot. I do not remember having to find that many as a kid. I do remember struggling on this level and finding it difficult and getting quite disorientated with where I was and where I had and hadn't been, but I did complete the game, so I obviously managed to do it at some point. You then go into your boss battle, which is obviously against Gaston, and you literally throw books at his head. I love the metaphor that's going on here, is that he's stupid and throwing books at his head might make him smart. I like that even though it feels kind of silly, they've stuck to Belle's character again and chosen something that reflects her and her part in the movie. And even though this level might not be my favorite in terms of gameplay, in terms of the atmosphere and vibe that it builds up, as much as it terrified me as a kid, I do love it, and I love that they were able to make this rich of an atmosphere in a Game Boy Advance game of all. I feel like the boss battle is also kind of easy, too easy for a boss battle. I feel like at least the Snow White one, you had to think about what you were doing in terms of dodging the apples. Even if you weren't directly throwing the weapon at the evil queen, you at least had to think about dodging, whereas with Belle, you can just stand in one place and drop a book every time. So I wish that bit was a little bit harder, but other than that, she's great. Now, the hilarious thing about this game is that Aurora has more airtime, action, and agency in this game than in her actual movie. Obviously in the movie, if you have seen Sleeping Beauty, you will know that within the first 15 minutes of the film, Sleeping Beauty is cursed and put to sleep. The rest of the movie is carried by Prince Charming, the fairies, and Maleficent. Her plotline revolves around her saving her parents, so again, they've obviously removed the prince part of this, and they've made it so that Aurora is living in the house with the fairies. They're named after just colours in this game. I'm not sure if there was a copyright thing going on. Maleficent has come and turned them into butterflies and hidden their wands, and also covered the castle in thorns and trapped Aurora's parents, the king and queen. So the first chapter takes place in the forest, and you are rescuing the 3 fairies that Maleficent has turned into butterflies. Helpfully enough, she actually hid the wands from the butterflies in chests in the forest where they are transformed, so they're easy enough to find. I guess that they are being guarded by her hybrid warthog human henchmen. You put them to sleep with a wave of your wand. So you use their wands to turn the corresponding fairy with the color wand back into their fairy form, I guess, fairy human form. Once you've done this, you actually go straight to the castle with them and try and find your parents. I don't know where Maleficent is at this time. I guess she's kind of commuting from her castle, and you have to defeat fawns by finding potions with corresponding color roses. There's a lot of color matching in this one. This level I really do like, but as a kid it was really tricky for me. Kind of like with Belle in the castle, I often found myself getting disorientated and confused with where I hadn't been, where I needed to go, because everything looked so similar, and it would literally take me hours to just do this one level, because I would just be running around the map trying to figure out where I had and hadn't been. Once you have destroyed all of the thorns, you can work your way up to your parents, who are trapped in the throne room. Once you've released them, you then have to defeat Maleficent, which is one of the harder boss battles of the game, I feel. You are standing on a bridge outside the castle essentially, and you use your wand to attack her. I think you have to hit her 4 times, but she has these magical orbs that are floating around her, and then they shoot off and they bounce off the edges of the screen, and then once you've hit her they disappear and then it restarts. So it's not too difficult. Once you get the hang of it and you get the timing, it's fine. Again, it's not my favorite section of the game, but it is one of the stronger ones, and I did enjoy playing it as a kid. I really do think that this one, considering that it literally flips the narrative of the original film on its head and actually features Aurora as the main character, it actually has the vibe and feeling of the film nailed down, and it's the most similar to the film than any of the other sections in terms of the way it feels. I feel like this one as a whole, if you take away the disorientation and the confusion of the chapter 2, it is kind of easy, but I do really like everything else about it essentially. Cinderella is the only character of this title to only have 2 chapters instead of 3. I'm assuming they did this because they kind of just copied Cinderella's original storyline, just minus the prince and the fact that she's going to the ball to meet the prince. The first chapter, as mentioned, gets you to run around the mansion cleaning Lucifer's footprints and bringing specific items to the stepmother. Do not be deceived, because even though there is only 2 chapters for Cinderella, chapter 1 is a hell of a section. Not only is this part timed, I think on the easiest level you get 10 minutes, medium is 9, and then hard is 8. But not only are you under a time pressure, Lucifer the cat, who you're cleaning up after, will repeatedly leave footprints throughout the 6 spaces of the mansion. He will go back to the same places that he's been to before and leave footprints. There is the ability to stun him to stop him from making footprints for a short amount of time, but you can only do this when the stepmother is not looking into the room that you are cleaning, and you have no way of knowing when and where she will do this. There is no pattern, there is no rhyme or reason. She will just pop up, and if she catches you with the cat, you are in trouble. And not only that, but obviously, as I mentioned, to 100% this game you have to have 100 coins per level, and the only way you can collect coins in this chapter for Cinderella is by Gus and Jacques dropping coins from the ceiling. So you have to wait for the coins, clean the footprints, whack the cat, check that the evil stepmother's not there, also meet her demands that pop up in a little like picture on the left bottom corner of the screen. This is an incredibly complex level, and you're on a time limit, like big time stress. There is a lot to think about in this level, and it is one of the most complex parts of this game. Surprisingly, even though I do feel like it is one of the harder levels of the game, I really did not remember it. You can then attend the ball once you have completed everything, and this is kind of like a boss battle, but it's very underwhelming. Don't get excited. As you would expect, with a dance, ball, music related setting, it is a rhythm minigame. You are going against the 2 evil stepsisters who show you the pattern that you're meant to do, and then you copy them afterwards. So you're pressing like A, A, B, B, A, B, B, A in a particular rhythm and beat, and you do this a few times until you complete the level. Obviously, this would be a lot harder for someone who struggles with rhythm keeping, but on the whole, it has a very, very easy learning curve, and once you've sort of like got the beat and you know what you're doing, it's very, very easy. Now, the Cinderella section is easily one of the weakest of the title in my opinion. It's one of that I said and mentioned that I remembered the least. I literally could not remember what her boss battle was until I watched it, and I was like, oh my god, of course, I remember this now. But I could remember every single other character's boss battle and like every chapter of the other characters, just not Cinderella. I could barely remember her first chapter, let alone her boss battle. That being said, I do really love how complex the first chapter is. It is really, really challenging, and I think especially for a younger player, it requires you to think really strategically about where you're going and what you're doing. Especially if you're trying to hit that 100% completion, you've really got to concentrate in this one and make sure you're getting everything done in that time limit. You know what's not a challenge though? Pressing the like button if you're enjoying this video, and subscribing to join the Otter Den to see many, many more videos just like this one. We are about to talk about one of my favorite sections of this game, and it is Ariel's chapters. I remember these chapters so vividly, and when I remembered this title and was talking about it with my friend Louise, the first one I thought of was Ariel, I'm pretty sure. Her section, to me, is one of the most exciting and memorable of this title, and I love it so much. And I do think this one probably strays the furthest from its movie counterpart the most, but it is very challenging and very enjoyable. The setup of Ariel's chapters, I think, is the most unique of the 6. Unlike the movie, she stays in her mermaid form the whole time, meaning her story all takes place underwater. This changes the gameplay format from the typical horizontal platformer that we've seen in the sections before to these huge open water spaces that you can explore vertically too. Her first chapter requires you to free Sebastian, who has been trapped in a cage aboard a sunken ship. You work your way around the sunken ship. You even at one point go out and like travel up the mast, which this bit scared me, especially with the shark coming back and forth. That low-key used to jump scare me when I was younger. Collecting the keys and using a magical trident to defeat Ursula's eels, you free him and move on to the next chapter. Here you are tasked with saving, I think it's 19 mer people who have been turned into those weird kelp, seaweed, seagrass things that you see in the movie. You use the magical trident to return them to their original form and then move on to the boss battle to defeat Ursula. Kind of similar to Maleficent's level. She's on like the right side of the screen and she fires her like tentacles at you and like bursts of water, I think. The only thing that might make this boss battle difficult is if you're struggling to get a hang of the speed of Ariel swimming and like having to turn around and swim different ways. I personally, like I said, I love underwater stuff, things that occur underwater. That makes me love this title even more, and for me, it was the most memorable part of the game. I feel like for some people, it's probably disappointing as Ariel stays a mermaid for the whole thing and you stay underwater, and you might not be interested in doing the underwater levels like I am, but personally for me, I liked this sort of mix-up in gameplay. It changed it up and gave some variation in what you were doing and how you were engaging with the environment. This level in itself really makes me want to play this game again. The whole game makes me want to play it again, but watching the Ariel section in the playthrough that I used, it just made me like, I literally went to eBay and tried to find cheap versions of this to be able to play on my DS Lite. I guess the only bad thing about Ariel's section is that the chapters, especially the first two, not so much the boss battle, but they're kind of the same thing. In the first one you're freeing Sebastian and in the second one you're freeing the mer people. It's a very basic and simple plot with not much complexity or depth to it. Last but not least is Princess Jasmine, who is by far the coolest version compared to her movie counterpart in this game. She's the only one to use a physical dangerous weapon in the entire game, and she also becomes a badass parkour master, parkourist, is that what you call them? Is that what parkour people call themselves, parkourist? And just intimidates people literally by looking at them. She doesn't even have to hurt them. Her first chapter begins in the magic cave, kind of similar to the movie, in which you are trying to find the magic lamp to be able to escape. You are on the magic carpet with Abu, and kind of similar to the Ariel levels actually, you are able to move horizontally and vertically around the space. This level, obviously being the last of the 6, is one of the hardest and most complicated. I don't know if it's more complicated than Cinderella's chapter 1, but in terms of what's going on in the space around you and the amount of things you have to think about, it's quite a lot. Once you find the magic lamp, you can then escape the cave with the help of the genie, and then you move on to part 2, which takes place in Agrabah, and this is where you become the parkour master. Again, this, like chapter 1, is also very complicated, and there's a lot of enemies walking around and lots of places to jump, run, send it through Agrabah. Like, you literally just freaking full on send it, bouncing on trampolines, living your best life, defeating enemies with your freaking sword. I think as well, I'm also forgetting in these levels that you have to collect the 100 coins to be able to 100% this title. So thinking about that in the context of Jasmine's level, like, this is quite difficult when you're looking at how many enemies are around and the amount of things you have to think about. You then go on to your final boss battle, which is Jafar. The playthrough that I watched, they literally just spam the freaking sword action and defeat Jafar in like 2 minutes, which is nuts to me because as a kid, I remember this level being so hard and like trying to think about all the different aspects. Like, trying to dodge everything in this level would literally make my little fingers sweat. I also feel like this is so much better than the movie. The movie, if you've seen Aladdin, you will know the like end bit with Jafar when he's captured Jasmine. There's this really weird, like, fake, creepy seduction bit where Jasmine pretends to be in love with him and, like, tries to seduce him. And I really love that the game takes that away. Although not my favorite level in terms of aesthetics, I love the way that they made Jasmine in this title, and they made her so badass and cool. I love how action-filled and full of puzzles this section of the game is. Watching the playthrough for this title, it does kind of just feel like they've chucked, especially in the magic carpet bit at the beginning, it does kind of just feel like they've chucked a load of random enemies into the space. It feels less purposeful and like thought through. However, like I said, I'm gonna say it again, I just love Jasmine's character in this section, and again, the way that they captured Agrabah as an environment is really, really nice. And it's so nice to see a proper like action-filled section in this game. Now we're finally getting on to the question marks at the end of the game. So once you have completed each princess's chapters and storyline, you then unlock the special level, which is less exciting than it sounds. I'm not gonna lie, it's incredibly underwhelming, and I remember as a kid like trying to be happy with it. Essentially, for the special level, if you haven't played the game, you get to play as all of the individual princesses again, collecting gems that fall from the sky. You're in a kind of like celebration environment, and each of the princesses in order like comes on screen in their like main outfit or like formal dress outfit, and rip to Ariel because she's literally still a mermaid and does not have a new like fancy outfit. She literally looks the same. But I will say, even though it is a little bit underwhelming, especially for like the last level of the game, like this is literally the last thing you do before you complete the game, and then once you've done this, you receive the tiara of friendship and the game is complete. You couldn't tell by the rest of this video, this game means a whole lot to me, and I love this game with my whole heart. Me and my sister played this game through so many times and it never got boring. Not only is it an incredibly pretty game to look at and to immerse yourself into, it's also surprisingly complex in gameplay and varies in game mechanics, and creates plots that portray the princesses as more aspiring role models than in their films. For what feels like was meant to be just a throwaway title by Disney and THQ, it's actually really, really good. And as much as I love this game, obviously it isn't perfect. I think other than the things that I've already mentioned in the video with the individual sections, my biggest problem with this game is the saving system. Instead of having a like save file section or a profile part, you're given a complicated and lengthy password at the end of each chapter so that you can save your game. So you go down to the password section at the bottom of the like title screen and you type in the password there to save your game. I also obviously feel like the special level at the end was a little bit underwhelming and could have maybe been a little bit more exciting. I feel like they could have had more of a platformer level, like a one in like the same celebratory environment. But after playing Jasmine, the suspense and like action just completely drops off. But on the whole, I do think that this game is a rare, underappreciated gem in the catalogue of 2000s Game Boy Advance girly games, and it's deceivingly well designed and put together, despite its like the way it looks and the fact that some people would probably think it's a shit game because it is a girly Disney princess game. It's actually really freaking good, and I would highly recommend it to you guys. This title will forever be a favorite of mine, and I do seriously count this game as one of the games that made me into the gamer that I am today. But that is going to be it for today's video. I really do hope you enjoyed. As normal, I am asking again, if you did enjoy this video, please consider dropping it a like and subscribe to the Otter Den to help me reach my 2,000 subscriber goal by the end of 2024. Hydrate to stay great, get your daily calorie intake, and I will see you in the next one.